Yeah. Yeah, I finally because I know when we had book club on what Saturday or Sunday, I had read all but like the last 30 I don't want to spoil it. Oh no. Well, I read like all but like the last 30 pages and I was like I'll just read the synopsis and get a feel for it, but like knowing what happens and reading what happens, oh my gosh. Oh,
Yeah, I really thought, I don't know what I thought, because I was like, because in the back of my head the whole time I was reading it, I was like, what are they gonna, they can't really get off the ship, like they're in space.
mhm.
So I was like, where's this going? And then, but I wanted them to like, I didn't think it was gonna end the way it ended. Um,
Yeah, I definitely thought it was gonna end. What was that movie? Gravity. Remember when it was Sandra Bullock and George Clooney, and he was gone. I thought that's what happened. Like I thought that's what was at the end of the book.
like I thought that, I don't know, I was like, oh,
Like
they're
I thought
gonna,
even if like there was a chance for like things to go well, I thought it was just gonna end up in like deep space. I didn't think it was gonna actually like land somewhere.
yeah, because I guess I really, when I picked up on it, it was like, when I picked up on, like, I guess it was like kind of like Wally a little bit like at the end, but like they like kind of just like, but I guess because in Wally they went back to Earth, but in this one they actually went to a different planet because they, but the science was like a little bit, I was picking up, I was kind of understanding it a little bit here and there, but
Yeah.
they kept throwing out words, and I was like, I'm just gonna pretend like I know what that word means, and I would just keep.
Child, because they when they started using all the Latin and they were talking about like, yeah, like there used to be an ancient language. And I was like, don't let the Latin nerd in me come out right now. Because I accidentally ended up taking 2 years of Latin in high school. And then like with the accidental taking, like part of our grade, we had to participate in like national Latin conventions every year that we were in Latin. So I was seeing all the words, and I was like, mm-hmm, okay, I'm gonna save this for later.
I thought it was gonna be, when I read this synopsis. I don't know why I thought I was gonna be like more. I thought it was gonna be more mystical because it's like ghosts, but then I was like, oh, it's like it got like really, really sciencey, and I was like, oh, okay, like this is not
Yeah,
really what
it
I
definitely
expected.
tapped in. I was definitely expecting more of like I guess an air of mysteriousness around it as well, but like a more air of like fantastical mysteriousness, if you will. But I will say it was a nice surprise because like my favorite genre is science fiction, so I was like,
Hmm.
oh, okay. But it was so interesting. I think it made me the whole time I was reading this, it reminded me of another book that I had read a couple of years ago called Splice. And I think Splice tried to do what an Unkindness of Ghosts actually did. Splice was a terrible book. If I could just burn that book, like if I wanted to just keep warm one day, that book is going in the fire. It was a terrible book, and I really, it's like not the same story, but like I guess kind of the metaphor that like the allegory that this book is doing
Hmm.
successfully and doing well and really touching on like when I tell you this book just had me locked in the whole time. And every single time I guess it felt like it hit all the points that the other book 100% failed at. And I always in the back of my mind after I had read that book, just for all these years, I've been like, I wonder if there's a book that will be able to do this successfully because I really do think that this is like a way to be done. And I think that Rivers did it perfectly, honestly. Like it was just there were so many places to relate in so many different ways. Oh, oh, I'm a fan. I'm gonna cry forever about this book, but I'm a fan.
I think the the trans allegory was done really well. I think the slavery allegory was done really well. I think that it just I think that, of course, when you have a class system and then we go off into space and they're stuck on this ship, like, of course that would end up with in like a slave situation. I think that probably, it just makes a lot of sense to me
Yeah.
because of the way that humans operate here on Earth. Like I don't know why I think they obviously would operate like that in space. Like I don't. It doesn't surprise me at all. So it just struck me as like a really uh it struck me as like really realistic. I thought what we found out about like I thought the mystery around her mother
Mhm.
was uncovered really well. Um
Yeah. I mean, even though they dropped like the big, I guess, twist of the actual journals pretty early on, like when they dropped it, I was like, no way. Like the way it just blindsided me. I'll tell you one thing about me, I do not see anything coming ever. And like I say that at a level where I still think like I remember everybody clown me because I didn't see the turn in A Fall from Grace coming. That literally that Tyler Perry, I did not see that coming at all. And people were like, you can see that coming 1,000 miles. I was like, I can't see anything coming. I don't really ever know what the hell's going on. And it was nice to like have something where it was just like a turn after a turn after a turn, but it was like everything kind of came back together in the end too. And it
mhm,
was like I don't know, it felt like the exploration and the getting closer and closer to what was going on, it felt more and more like her mother left everything as a labor of love, if that makes sense. Like it would
mhm.
take a minute to parse through and get to, but she was gonna, yeah, yeah. I don't know how to say, I don't know how to put it into the words I want to put it into, but it was beautifully done. I think that it was really well fleshed out. It was a fantastic book, honestly. Now, can I read it again? No, that would hurt a little bit too much. This one I might have to read like once every 2 to 3 years, maybe once a decade. But it was a beautiful read, honestly.
Part of me feels like it was the ending was like a little too neat. Like
Yeah.
I just like I wonder like how this would end up like speaking about like these people. I don't know if these people are like free. Like I don't know. It kind of gave like Snowpiercer a little bit. Like I don't know if you've ever read. I don't know if you ever watched that, but like it's basically like there's like a it's
I
like a
know
po-
that one because it's a movie.
it's a post-apocalyptic train thing where like um the earth is like frozen over and then like this train that's like going like
Oh,
nowhere. It's just like a internal like track, like it just goes on the same track over and over and over
Um,
again.
and
oh,
There's like
Tilda
it's
Swinton
basically
absolutely ate as one of the relatives on my mother's side of the family.
it's basically like it's a lot like this, except like instead of space, they're on a train.
they're on a train.
And
Oh,
um so there's like and they're not like slaves per se. I mean they're kind of just like untouchables. Like they're just um they're not really like working at all. They're just like there's like you
they're
have
just class.
like yeah, you have like class. It's like a class, more like a class thing. Um, but it like so like at the end of Snowpiercer, no spoilers, but it's kind of
Oh,
over,
no
and then
spoilers.
it's like where to let. Sometimes I feel like movies end and it's like it's over, but then it's like so where do we go from here? Like I want the answer to like what happens next, but
Mm-hmm.
it's it's interesting that that's kind of how this one ended. I don't know how it could have ended differently with a more positive ending, but especially with the way that that last little bit of the book was going after they rerouted the ship, they were like on death row basically. So like it's like if they didn't,
Yeah.
land, she was gonna die basically. So it was like
Mm-hmm. I also wanted to, because I remember what I wanted to say when you were talking earlier. it reminded me there were so many like I guess little things that were so reflective of like the society that we're in right now too. And it's like not even stuff that was explained in the world building, stuff that was just in the world already. Like when the blackouts were happening, right? It was because of the autopilot. And at the same time, like the energy was just by design was automatically diverted from the people that were in the lower decks. Like that was it. That was just how it happened. And it's like it didn't even get explained. It was just that was the way it was. And it was something that I was thinking about, like that, we talk about that right now a lot. I mean, I have
Mhm.
a whole bookshelf on like algorithmic bias and how numbers aren't ever unbiased because there's always somebody working behind them. There's always somebody designing a program. Like a number is a number. When it starts being manipulated by people with biases, it's obviously going to produce biases. And it just
Right.
felt like that was something that was in the story and it wasn't really talked about, but it was something that I've been thinking about it more and more since like the further I get away from the book. I'm like, that's a part that wasn't even explained. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, well, yeah, that's like that's almost a 1-to-1 of where we are right now. So it was just so interesting to see like even the parts that weren't explained. Rivers did a great job of tying it right back to quite literally where we are now.
Right. Yeah, I think she used the current state of our world today to sort of fill in the blanks about like how we got to that point as a society. I think that it reminds me a little of like Parable of the Sower and Parable of Talents by Octavia Butler. If you guys haven't read that, I would recommend it. It's a post-apocalyptic, well, it's not post-apocalyptic, it's a what's the word? The word
Is it the dystopian?
dystopian. It's dystopian. Um, there's a dystopian series about this duology about like the world gets hit with like a disease, and then like there's like fires and droughts, and then after that like the world is kind of like in shambles, the US specifically, and then like moving forward from there. So um it reminded me of that somewhat,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the way that it kind of opens and the perspective of the main character. So that
Yeah.
was interesting.
Ooh,
Uh,
the main character versus the surgeon growing into themselves and understanding. Oh, relating to both those characters was so wild. And then like the same like you're talking about the it also reminded me like I was born and raised in Texas, unfortunately back in Texas now, but it reminded me a lot of a lot of the mega churches and stuff that are based out of Texas and based out of the South when the leaders, or I guess whatever they're called, the lieutenants, whatever, they were talking about like the gulf of sin is widened when you sin, blah blah blah. And it was like y'all are taking all of these actions that were created by deliberate biases and moralizing them into a right or wrong, black or white scenario, and people have to agree because if they don't agree, then boom, automatically they're morally wrong and they're suffering these consequences that y'all are now making not only public but devastating. And it was very poignant. It definitely like I don't remember which specific I guess revision because like they were the not the sergeant, the lieutenant and the whatever the other dude's name was, how they were just like rephrasing things in real time and like in their favor. It was reminding me of when Texas had petitioned to change their history books to say that slaves were migrant workers that were just coming over here looking for work. Um, and it just like I like when I tell you, I was reading a lot of it. Like as I was reading it, I would just like hear specific phrases or I would see specific things, and it would just kind of like snap me to stuff that I've seen in real life. And it was, I think it's very it's very tricky work to be able to bring I guess, a fantastical universe of sorts, as well as making it a universe that it feels. I guess, like, metaphorically, it feels like I could reach out and touch that universe. Like, it feels like it's right here. We're doing a lot of the same struggles, a lot of the same uprisings, even, if you will, and the same punishment. Oh, your mic went out.
It feels like a very natural progression.
Yeah, and it was like, um I think that was such a poignant part of it, is being able to see the buildup of individuals as well as the buildup of the community.
Mhm.
Um, and being able to see that as someone who's got a lot building up, like, as a Black trans person, in the middle of like a bunch of communities that are rising up for a whole bunch of different reasons, and like experiencing a lot of oppression at the same time. Um, and I think that it was one of those things where it was like, it felt like it was a happy ending, even though we have no idea what's gonna happen next. And like, this is a whole new planet. Like, what's gonna happen
Right.
from here? And at the same time, like, literally the scenario of anywhere is better than here. And so it was like the fact of
Yeah, that's
it can
true.
get anywhere but here was in itself like the triumph. And it was interesting to sit with that, because it felt like it was achieving the escapism that I know I get myself stuck in. Like, what if I was just anywhere but here? And then it was like, cut out. Like, Aster literally made it anywhere but here. And it was like, it wasn't necessarily a resolution so much as it felt like it was just a place to rest. And I think we got to sit in that rest, even though there was so much uncertainty as the book ended. Like, we don't know what happens next, but at the same time, like, for a moment, we get to just rest.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. I see that it like I can understand how it bookends the book. Um, and I did enjoy the ride to here. It just I don't know. I wish it was like a I don't know like an epilogue or something, or
Yeah.
like it just
Oh
like
yeah.
tagged on like
I definitely understand that. I know me. I think I liked it. I like the open ending, because I love to just daydream. I love my mind to go off in the background, because when it's doing stuff in the background, I can concentrate in the front. So like, it feels like whenever I read books that kind of come to an open close, I guess it's like I can spend time imagining any one of 1,000 different endings in my head. And also, I would love I would love to know how Rivers wants this book to end. And at the same time, I feel like
mhm.
it gave me, or it gave my brain space to see what I could come up with, I guess.
Yeah.
If I was a fanfic writer, I feel like I would be having a ball. Me personally, I can't. I can give you like a 14 line poem for sure. It's gonna be impactful, but that's about it. That's kind of where I cap at. So I don't know. I wouldn't be able to like write, but it feels like it definitely leaves. It's like it leaves things to the imagination, in more of a sense that, like, you can build it off where you want to satisfy like whatever needs you need. I don't know. It felt like a kind of catharsis. I think all that to say, it kind of felt like a catharsis. Like, you can bring from the ending what you
Hmm.
want to bring to it, especially in the ways that you related to different characters throughout the book.
Yeah. Maybe it's because I watched a lot of TV, so to me it kind of felt like the end of like season one.
Mm-hmm.
So
I definitely hear that.
so it's like I was like, oh, I want to know what I think it's because I want to know what happens next.
Yes.
And I know that I'm not gonna get it. It feels a little disappointing in that sense. But
Yeah, no, I hear that for sure. I
um
definitely hear that, because it doesn't wrap up nice. It's like, okay, we're in a new place. We're out of the old place, but it's like a whole new place. Ain't nothing started yet. Ain't nothing finished yet.
and it's
And I
just like
want to know
living
what
in
happens
this
on the
world and
ship too.
knowing that how like
Hmm.
you can't just get rid of dynamics like that. Like it just sort of persists into, you know, it persists into the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Hmm.
So I just want like a full I think if they had been like a full like revolution, or something like that, I would have felt a little more closed on it. But like I feel like, we still gotta get the revolution going. We still gotta make sure that,
Yeah,
you know, the
exactly. Like,
people on the bottom don't stay on the
mm-hmm.
bottom.
Yes. And I think like, and this a very, very, it's not a comparison, but it's a very, very loose tie. Like I'm thinking about like in the Hunger Games, right? They had that whole revolution, and then the books after that were just like what happened after that, which was quite literally like the government was like, hey, actually, we're just gonna bomb y'all. We're not having a revolution, we're gonna take care of this. And so it was like you got to see the aftermath of what happened later. Now, do I think that the book series, that's a whole different story. That's a whole different story for sure. But like definitely it was nice to see Aster be able to get out, and also like all the like everything led up to that, and then she left the ship. What happens to the people that are still on the ship? Because it's like, we saw so many harsh penalties for small things, and like the whole community just rose up and like killed some people. So what is gonna happen after that? Like what
Right.
happens from there? For sure. It's like I want to know what happens there, and at the same time, it's like I want to know, and I think I also enjoyed having the option to not know for this one instance. And also I still wanted, like, at a later date, I want to go back and know what happened there. And at the same time, it was nice to see like a moment for a second, just a bit of rest. And I want to know what happened. It's
How
in the
did you
back of
feel
my
about the like the surgery part of it, like the like the hysterectomies and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean and that I think that's why I ended up relating to Aster and the surgeon so much, because for me, like that was like it felt like the same reasons that Aster got her hysterectomy are the same reasons that I want a hysterectomy. Cause I'm like, I don't want to deal with any of that shit. I don't, this is nothing like I've ever wanted to, none of it. And it's wild because like the older I get, I guess the more towards the, because they don't perform that procedure unless you're usually around like 30s, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So like as I'm getting up to that mark, I'm realizing as a trans person, they already don't want to respect my healthcare in general. So it's like being
Yeah, it's
able
almost
to,
like you gotta get that as soon as possible because you never know,
when I
especially
tell, like,
especially
I'm
with the
like,
way that,
hello,
especially if
you
you're in
asked,
Texas
like when
right
she was
now. Oh Lord.
like, it's terrible. It's terrible because like, everybody wanted to wait me, like they wanted me to wait to be an adult, and then like I'm an adult, and I also don't like, I still don't want it, and they're like, oh well, just give it time, just give it time. I'm like, y'all done got 26 years. It's about to be 27. Get this shit out. Thanks.
They're like
But like
convinced that
definitely
like
between
there's like a
that and
chip in your brain that'll like eventually, if you wait long enough,
literally, I'm
you'll
like,
change
it's
your
not gonna
mind.
literally. And the wild part is that when I was engaged a couple years back, I was planning on having kids. And then I was like, I already live in Texas. I'm already black. I'm already trans. My partner's already non-binary. Do I really want to add being pregnant on top of that? Because this is way too much stress. Like it was a point where I was in grad school at that point, and that was causing me so much stress. My job was causing me so much stress. And I was like, on top of that, this by the fact of the state that I live in, somebody that looks like me walking around pregnant is gonna put me in danger. And my fiance I stand at a smooth 5'3", and my fiance was shorter than I was. I was like, we neither of us are gonna be safe in this situation. And so to just like think about that, like to sit down and actually talk about that with her and just think about that, it was definitely a lot. And so it was interesting being able to see it in the book too. And then relating to the surgeon on both the points of like punishing yourself when you don't live up to your expectations, and also knowing that your expectations are just not you. They're not coming from you. Ooh, we. Whew.
Yeah, it's kind of like how she like it like says like on her like her file or her birth card or something. It says like breeder or like prime to breed or like for
Mm-hmm.
breeding, and it's like
And she was
seeing
like, I
that
guess
like I was
take that
like
off.
I don't know. It just feels like there's like this expectation that like you're supposed to like pump out kids. It's like so
Exactly.
daunting, and even if like
And that spoke to where
maybe
we are right now too. Like a lot of people are like, well, the
oh yeah,
workforce just needs
reproductive
more
rights,
kids. We
yeah.
just need more bodies. And like when they were talking about like using just electrifying pieces of like old lower deck people, I was like, it's the same way I felt with Black Mirror when I was like, this is a really innovative TV concept. And also, if y'all give too much detail, the US is gonna repeat it for funsies. So let's keep it very distant. Let's not talk about anything too specific because they will steal y'all's designs and try them on people like me. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's something I think about a lot when I think about because being a lover of science fiction, and like when I was growing up, I loved Michael Crichton books. Like one of my favorite books was The Andromeda Strain. And also the kind of books that he makes, like if the US decides to take an interest into things like that, it's like people like me are gonna be the ones that they try those things on first. And so it was like growing up being very aware of both of those things. Like growing up enjoying science fiction and bio warfare, all that stuff, it's been very interesting growing a little bit older and being like, well, if that ever does happen, you'll be the first to know. Yeah. But it was definitely being able to relate to both sides of them. Or I guess not both sides of them, both of those characters. And then I guess watching the surgeon, it was like not necessarily change his system of morals so much as better understand not everything is as rigid as it seems. Now, the fact that it took so long to find that out, that's neither here nor there. That's a commentary for a different time for sure. But it was just interesting watching both characters develop and grow and figure out where that came from. So yeah, it
Yeah,
was it was interesting.
yeah, and I was thinking like even as like a gay man, like I feel like there's like my family, it's not really much society, but like my family puts like pressure on me to like, oh, don't you want kids? Don't you want like don't you want to have kids?
Mhm.
Like have kids, have kids, have kids, have kids, have kids. And you're like, even if I don't even know, even if I did have kids, I just the idea of like using my biology to produce a kid, it's like I don't know, even if I want to do that. Like if I want a
Mhm.
kid, why like maybe I'll adopt. Like I don't
Like it's we it takes so much effort to like 9 months. I'm not even the same person I was 9 months ago on a good day. Like, but then I'm
yeah.
pregnant on time. But yeah, like, and that's something I've also struggled with my family. My family was like, they were very, very like pure oriented. So like, no sex, no nothing. And then a couple years later, I was like, I think I'm ace. Like, I think I don't want to do that. And they were like, but you don't want to have kids. You don't want to explore. I'm like, is it Uchiwali or is it one mic, y'all? Like, let's get it together.
Yeah, that's I have noticed that too. It's like people like there's like this huge purity culture, and then when somebody comes out as asexual, they're like for some reason that's not accepted, even though like
Mhm. They're
you
like, but don't you
know
want blah blah blah? And I'm like, you just told what did you just tell me yesterday? Let's think back on 24 hours ago. Like
even though
it's
like nuns and like priests are like live asexual lives, like I don't know, it's like weird
mhm.
to like
Yeah, and
preach that like no, but you can't be that. Like that's
exactly.
crazy.
And it's frustrating because like I know for me, especially and like that was one of the other reasons I was reconsidering having kids because I realized there's so much more stuff that I had to deal with my own upbringing.
Right,
And like I'm gonna deal with it. I realized I was like, I'm gonna deal with it, but I have to deal with it on my own time.
right,
Because if I decide that I just don't want to finish dealing with it and then I have kids anyway, that's not gonna be good for those kids. Never
right,
mind that it's not going to be good for me. It's not going to be good for those kids. It doesn't make sense for me to bring kids in this world when I'm not ready to do all the work to work through that, both before and during and after having those kids. So for me, I was like, that's a little too much work for me to do fast enough to be able to have kids and then still have the energy to work through my own stuff while I'm raising my kids. And that's not fair. So for me, it wasn't fair. It didn't feel fair to me to put that on any potential kids that I would have. So it's just me and my cat now. My cat that I was not supposed to have in general, but we get along pretty well. And since I don't have no kids, she gets whatever she wants, except the brisket I was eating today. She actually beat me up for that, but that's okay.
Yeah, this I thought the entire like concept and everything of that was really well realized. I really like the like thinking about like what the ship looks like and thinking about what like how it'll like
Why did
they
I think it
move.
was the Flying Dutchman ship half the time? I was like, it's just the Flying Dutchman ship with like a ton of lower decks you can't see. That's the only thing my mom would let me visualize. So that's the ship that shows up every single time I think about the ship.
In my head, I was thinking like the ship from like Wall-E.
Oh, like the cruise ship spaceship.
Ooh, I did not do that. I did.
I
Hello.
was like, go ahead.
I don't know how my hand got raised. I was like, I did not do that. But yeah, I was thinking like the ship from like Wall-E in my head. So like I was thinking like, okay, so it's like a cruise ship with like a lot of deck, and then like so like that's what I was thinking in my head. So like it's a cruise ship but a spaceship.
With
That's
baby
what I
son
was
at the
thinking.
ship. When they said baby son, I was like, Teletubbies. I'm so sorry. Like that was my first. Like they said baby son and like the baby and like the baby son from Teletubbies giggled in my head. I said, no, but close.
That was one thing that I kind of didn't understand, and like I was like, I'm just going to keep reading because I don't really understand what that's going on there. So and
I
it
said
helped
baby
because
son's taking it, I guess.
and also I was listening to it in the audiobook, so like
Oh,
I was
what
like,
was
should I
the
pause it and like figure out what this is, or should I just like keep going? And I just kept going. I was like, let me. I was like, let me just read on, and maybe I'll figure it out later. And that's kind of what happens with a lot of stuff. Like in this, like I was like I didn't get it until I got it, if that makes sense. And then I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then I went back and thought about it. So I'll probably listen to it again just because I think that now that I know kind of like a better grasp on like what everything is going on, I think going back to the beginning and
Yeah,
like
and picking
it
up
will
like yes, seeing where it all starts to like click. Yes. Oh,
I think that'll
yeah.
enhance the reading experience for me.
And there were so many places like is I did pretty much the same thing I did with Parkeisha's book where I dog eared and I highlighted where I could because I wish it's like I unpacked everything in my bookmarks. I wish I could tell you where any of my bookmarks were. So I just dog eared a bunch of stuff. But the two things that stuck out to me because I know like I coming from a very, very deeply seated Christian family, and then also having to bring myself out of the internalized homophobia and the internalized transphobia that I had. And it was like bring myself out of that while still being surrounded by it. I think there were, and I finally found them, there were two quotes that stuck out to me. One of them was that Gulf of Sin part that we talked about. And it was says, Aster sometimes like to imagine her words were true, that all the bad things she'd ever done formed the fabric of the cosmos, the Gulf of Sin. And that was so real. Like that's what it felt like as a kid when they would be like, oh, you did like the worst thing ever. You did the worst sin, or like, being gay, being queer, being trans, this is like worst sin. And I'm like, okay, if this is the worst sin ever, and this is just who I am, then y'all are not gonna like how this is gonna turn out. It was the same kind of conversation that I'd had with my mom around the time what the Call Me What You Want or Call Me by Your Name music video, remember by Montero when it came out.
Mhm.
Um, and my mom was like, oh, there's all this devil imagery. And I was like, you keep telling me, all my queer friends, all my trans friends, that we're headed to this underworld of pain because we're queer and trans because of who we inherently are. And then you're getting mad at us for like just okay, if y'all want us to be here, we're gonna make content here. We're gonna make things about this, like things about that. And she was like, well, yeah, well, you're not supposed to be happy about it. I'm like, well, you've been telling me the same thing for 20 something years. I'm not sure what you want me to do. What else do you want me to do about it? And then that also it tied into the next quote, which was I think it was a different part of Aster interacting or after interacting with the lieutenant or something. But it says she didn't like religion because religion didn't like her, often treating her cruelly. And never has something rang so true with me, especially with the Christianity that I had to grow up and around and through, than that line right there. Because religion just started out treating me cruelly and never stop. And then I was expected to be like, oh, well, I love this religion anyway. For what? Whether I love it or I hate it, it's going to treat me the same. I may as well, like I said last week, I may as well reorganize my little farm and mind my business.
Yeah, like I think that that reminded me. I also really enjoyed like the little like allegories, like the little stories that they would tell like throughout the book, like how it would just like tell like a little story, and then I'm like, oh, that's like really. It reminded me like of like because I like short stories, so I really like that part of it. And thinking about like, oh, okay, what does that mean, and how does that relate to the story? I thought it added a layer of depth to the story that I really enjoyed.
Yes, that's really what it is. I really think that Rivers just took their time really like writing this book because it feels like there's so many places where you can just sit and explore in the book, I guess. Like there's so many different pieces of it that you can pull out. It feels like it gave you like we talked about the end, definitely wishing there was more and like there's just more in general. And at the same time, like it felt like even though there was an overarching theme, there was an overarching book, and also inside of that, like you were talking about, there are the short stories, even the short stories that the different characters told each other. It was like, boom, that came from somewhere, and now we have like a whole little story inside a story that becomes a lesson that is learned within the same story. Is oof, I enjoyed it. I enjoy a good, thorough book. I really think that they just took their time and kind of gathered everything together. I feel like I've read a lot of books or I've watched a lot of shows too recently where it feels like things get put in and then they never get not necessarily resolved, but it's like an Easter egg that never gets pointed out again. It just gets put in, maybe with the intention of resolving it later down the line or bringing it back up later down the line, and the show gets canceled, or they had to wrap the book up, and so it just kind of like it gets put there, and then nothing ever happens, or like something completely reverses whatever it was talking about. But it feels like there are a couple of like not even a couple, there are a good couple of points here where it's just kind of like the stories and the little bits and pieces that we got ended up kind of bringing together the machine, quote unquote, that is the book.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely got that. It it reminded me of kind of it felt like the way the story progressed and how the characters moved through the ship, and then how they it's all like really felt like really thought out. It felt like I was there in the ship.
Mhm.
you know um
Heart beating just the same, exactly.
the imagery was like really um what's the word like the imagery was really good. I really felt like um with the I felt like I was seeing what she was describing, and even some of the things that didn't make sense as much because like the sciencey part, I like kind of got like the scope of like what she was describing, like so I could imagine
Yes.
it, but like I didn't really know like it all the even if I didn't know what she was talking about all the way, like I didn't really piece it
Like you could get
together.
a
I still yeah.
yes. That is where science fiction used to fall so short. Because like Michael Crichton's books, those books are like 400 something pages. You could start in the middle of that book and know what was going on from there on because the first half of the book is just literally setting up the world, setting up why like some random counter in a machine somewhere counts the way it does, and then it shows up like later in the book. But it's like if you didn't want to read all of that part, there is no way for you to know where you could start the book and still get the same story without like being able to skip all of just the mechanic sciencey part. And I think that that was a really good part too, where it was like I feel like I got my science fiction fix. Like I was able to get all the mechanics and stuff, and at the same time, it didn't end up going super super deep into everything. Like you were talking about, like you could still get and grasp and understand what was going on without it having to be like 100-page prologue of why everything
Yeah.
is the way it is. When I tell you, that's why I stopped reading the damn books. I'm not gonna lie to you. I did not know where the story would start. I would sit there and read the first 150 pages, and the story would not even be started yet.
Yeah, a lot of those a lot of science fiction books, especially like adult science fiction and adult fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that has like it's really like in the beginning it's like it's just like a lot of setup.
And
And
it's
that
like
can
I love that the little parts come up later. And at the same time, like if I just sat there and read the actual story without knowing the backstory, I would still love those little parts just as much. I really don't need to know why they got double, like why there's a D battery instead of a C battery in this. I don't. I'm so sorry, but I really don't.
yeah.
Like I
Some
yeah.
people really enjoy that part. So I can understand like maybe
Oh
how
yeah.
some people that do enjoy that might not might be a little might feel like they're a little left out to dry. But
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the fact that Rivers doesn't River Solomon doesn't like hold your hand. She just kind of like gets to the story and then you kind of pick up things as you go along. So I
Hmm.
enjoyed that.
Yeah, exactly. I think it feels like the older I get, I think I lost my patience for being able to read through the whole world. Whereas, like, with this book, I felt like I was able to, like you're talking about, I was able to kind of envision it as it was happening. And the parts that, like, if there was a mechanical part that needs to be explained, it was explained like in the scene where it was taking place rather
Right.
than like I had to, because I remember at one point there was one book I was reading a couple of years back, and I ended up having to like try and reference what they were talking about to like where they had first introduced it 100, 200 pages earlier. And it was just kind of like, it got clunky. There was
Hmm.
no integration of it into the actual book. It was like, okay, I love the world building. And also, can we build the world as we're moving through it as well? Like, I need you to set the stage while I'm also in the stage because you set the stage for 100 something pages. Love it. And also, the book is another 300 something pages. I forgot what the stage looked like about halfway through the actual story.
Because you're
And
not
that's
actually you don't have anything to attach the information to a lot of times.
that's what it is.
So it's
Yes.
like
Like
sometimes it just
it
goes
didn't
in one
happen.
ear, out the other ear, or like
Mm-hmm.
in one
Where it's like,
eye,
and
out the other eye, or
yes,
whatever you want to do it when you're reading.
like
But like,
when especially yeah when they were like talking about like baby sun, when they were talking about the mechanics of baby sun, and they were starting to talk about like the magnets, like the electromagnetism and stuff. It was like I knew what was going on, and at the same time, while they were being able to go in depth about it and explain it as Aster was seeing it, like I guess getting the visualization and the explanation of like the mechanics too, it was kind of putting two and two together at the same time. So it was like every time they would talk about Baby Sun after that, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's what like just reminding myself, like, oh, big magnet, period, period, period. And so it was very helpful. I think the way that Rivers was able to put everything together in the moment instead of like
mhm.
setting it and then just hoping that you keep up all the way through.
Right, yeah.
But it was ooh wee. This was a very well done book. I will say like my chest definitely got tight in some areas for sure. And I think that it evoked the emotions that it needed to evoke. And I think I definitely think part of me enjoying the ending is definitely relative to my positioning in society as well as like where I live, like literally living in Texas. It was
Hmm.
nice to see somebody get out and make it out. Like me trying to get out of Texas and ending up right back in the exact same spot that I started in Texas pisses me off to no end. And so I think just being able to see Aster make it. And it's like, yeah, it's super uncertain where it's gonna happen next. And at the same time, like she's out. Like regardless, she's out. And
Yeah,
it
I can
was
understand like the catharsis of like just getting
yeah,
out of that
yeah.
situation, and that I think that definitely came across in the text. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so and on that end, I think it was satisfying. I think that there is, and now that you explained it that kind of that way, I can kind of see what she was going for with like It like with the catharsis of like breaking through
Yeah, and I mean
that
that's
current
kind of how it felt.
scenario.
Yeah, that's like it's I think I also kind of relate to it because that's how I felt when I moved. Like when I moved out of Texas, I moved to Atlanta, so I moved 15 no 14 hours away. I literally just packed up all the stuff that I could fit in my car. I packed like all my big apartment stuff because I have a car, like a little four-door sedan. It's nothing big at all. So I packed up all that I could, which was just clothes. I couldn't fit any furniture or anything. Packed up all my clothes, moved 14 hours away. And when I got there, I was like, I don't know too many people here. I got to get a feel for what's going on. And at the same time, anywhere is better than where I started out. And so I think
Right.
it gave me that feeling. And I think it was nice to have it open ended because I think in real life it feels like I experience what happens when you go somewhere and you start anew. Which was that I loved the city. I absolutely loved where I was, but the interactions that I had there were quite literally getting worse by the day, by the week, by the month. And then I ended up moving back here by chance. And like this is like the home I grew up in. So it's like I moved right back to where I started for sure. And I think that I want to say that's probably why I really enjoyed that it was just open ended, that Aster landed and it was just possibility and then it ended because I'm like, I know where possibility can lead. It led me right back to where I started. But maybe for here, it may not. And I think that's why I ended up being so fond of the ending. I know,
Yeah.
especially if I had read this book before I left, or if I had read this book while I was still in Atlanta, I probably would feel a little bit differently about it for sure.
Hmm. Yeah. I can see that. Like I think that um being in that situation where you're like where you just like pick up and go, like pack everything you can take. Like it kind of reminds me of like what I would do and like when I would go back and forth like to school because I went away for college and then like I would have to like pack all
Mm-hmm.
my stuff from my dorm and pack it all up and then come back every summer and stuff like that.
That
So
we really just normalized, like you just pack up the whole life, move back for 3 months, and bring that whole life back to the dorm for real.
yeah, because like I don't know, it's like for something like partially like I was like kind of like homeless. Like technically I was like I didn't live with my sister, but I was just going to her. I was just spending the summer at her house.
Mm-hmm.
Like technically, really, if you wanted to get technical, I like lived at my school. That's where I spent most of my time. And then like so and then to think like to be stuck. That's why it felt so daunting to me in the book because I was like they're like on this ship like they really can't go anywhere like
Yes, yes, yes. Like
so
they
like
really couldn't. That was it, and that's why I was so curious as to like what happened to everybody else that was still on the ship. Like yes, estimate, and also y'all killed a lot of people. Like that's not gonna be a nice next couple of years, decades.
right yeah and like I hope they can get like the resources and stuff like it just
Mm-hmm. Because it's like and I don't want to say it was kind of a collapse. It was like it was both a collapse and also like the upper decks were quite literally watching from the upper decks while everything was going on. Like nothing
right
in air world was really changing. If anything, it was a show. Like I feel like the biggest thing that happened for them was watching what the surgeon did. That was about it because that was
yeah
supposed to be like what God's hands, it would a baby son's hand, whatever they called it. But it was like other than that, because I'm thinking, like especially just because you brought it up, like now I'm thinking about like the repercussions, what would happen after that, because a revolution, especially that like that just ends all of a sudden. If anything, that's going to result in worse treatment for the lower decks for sure. That's going to result in planned blackouts, like all this stuff. And it's just like, hmm,
yeah and
mm.
then you think about like are they going to be able to get off the ship are they with like
Exactly.
what because what the people in Upper Deck even want to leave the ship, like because like you get stuck on a new planet, like I don't even know if you would want to like there's like space for one thing, but then it's like also like do I want to leave like all the resources are on the ship, like so do I want to
Mhm.
leave this ship or not, like so
And then
it's
also, yeah, it's
crazy.
like when the people, and then at the same time, like, what would the upper deck folks do if the people who, what do you smell? I was eating barbecue. I'm sorry, I didn't share. She about to beat me up after this call. But I think that something's gonna have to change, especially if there's like, the lower deck folks were the folks that were kind of putting together all the resources, getting all the things together. Like, what happens when if that part has collapsed, especially like if the fields, everything, blah, 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 collapse, and the upper deck all of a sudden just doesn't have the resources that they're so used to having on demand and like on deck and call, just in general, what's gonna happen after that? Is it ooh wee? There's so many questions. I think that's kind of why I liked it left open, because it's like you can just sit and think about it for hours, and also ooh wee. Mm.
Yeah, I
Like these.
feel overall like I really enjoyed it. It was such a good ride experience. Like it was heralding, like I was like, ooh, like I was like my heart was like
Yes.
beat. I was like, I don't
I had
know,
to put
like
the book down sometimes and be like, oh, okay. Just set it down for like 5 or 10 minutes and then come back to it. Like that day when I was trying to finish it before book club, I stopped like that last 30 pages. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do that. I was like, I'm gonna have to come back in the chat after I read these last 30 pages. That's why I was glad we were talking about it another day, because I was like, I could finally finish this book. And finishing that book versus reading what happened, oh my god. Like I said, those are two very different experiences, because I don't think I was, man, I don't think I was like wrecked reading what the ending of the book was. But actually reading the ending of the book, I went to bed that night and did not go to sleep till like 3 a.m. I was in the bed at like probably a smooth 10, 11. And I was just up, just thinking about those last 30 pages for the next like 3 hours.
yeah, and River Solomon is I think River Solomon is trans.
I mean, that would explain it. That would explain why it was so well written. Because like that, when I tell you, I kept thinking of Splice. I encourage y'all to never read Splice. I'm gonna have to find the author for y'all, but it is a very bad allegory for like trans rights, trans revolution. That's very centered around cis people with a very, very disappointing ending. That kind of comes out of nowhere. And so it was like it definitely felt like I said earlier, it felt like this book was made with like love. It took care and it took time to bring these characters, bring these people to life and to make them human. I think that's what was missing in books that I had read before that were supposed to be trans allegories. One of these days I'll figure out how to say that word. Until then, I'll alternate for the rest of my life. But like I think that that's also one of the reasons why I like this book so much, is because I couldn't find a book for so long that was able to do what Rivers has done with this book.
Yeah, then they're non-binary, just to be clear. And they live in England. Wow.
In England, I be forgetting that England is like a real place. Like, ooh, we.
Yep, it's real.
Because, child, the beans on toast community, they can keep it personally, but
You guys eat beans on toast in Australia? Yeah.
Yeah, like Australia is still very much a British colony, and you get a lot of like Australian boomers in particular who are just like massive Britain stands.
oh my
And
goodness.
it's two of which are my parents. My parents
Oh,
do not like American stuff. Like I'll say store instead of shop, and they'll just be like, "It's shop." And then Yeah, they'll just get like they'll just
Wow.
get like like unreasonably. They'll like correct me when I say something that's like the American way of doing something. Like, oh, you've been watching too much television, Ian.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
there's
so
a
funny.
little bit of cultural tension there. I think they're worried
Child.
about the American cultural hegemony.
And my
And then
mom got on to me one time. I called her mum once in my
Mom,
I don't know, like I have never seen her like snap at me for something like that. She's like, I am not your mom. I'm your mom. I'm your mother. And I was like, what's going on?
is it?
What's I was like, what? I've never
Maybe
seen
she
her
listened
say
to that
anything
Megan
like this.
Trainor song or something.
I don't know why they let her make that song. Who told her that she was mother? Like
Oh, I
I
like it
just
how
an open call. Whoever called Megan Trainor mother, be on notice, first of all.
I
Like, you listen to me.
I
No, that
like the